So what I decided to do, we're just tell me where to stop and clarify. Like, if you want to say a praise, can you clarify in that? I'm just going to go down on this little visual aid I have here, and we'll just do it that way instead of just throwing everything at you. You can just follow the list, my friend.
Yeah, I got my WordPad open. I'm ready to take notes. I got it.
Nice.
Awesome, nice.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna put it a little bit. Wonder if I should make it. I probably should make it a little bit bigger than this. Hold on.
So
There we
Praise,
go.
in all seriousness, so how long do you think you're going to open up the room?
It's totally up to Kevin. Like, this could go for an hour, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to play it by ear because I really don't know. It's up to Kevin.
Okay, very good.
I don't suspect it to be too long, but let's just try to get through it. So,
okay.
Is that big enough? Yeah, I think that's pretty big.
Yeah, that looks good, man.
Okay. So let's define terms before we get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steer towards Van Tillian Presup. For the most part, we're going to avoid the minutia and getting into the weeds. So here's the definition, the textbook definition of epistemology. The term is derived from the Greek episteme, knowledge, and logos, reason or logos. And accordingly, the field is sometimes referred to as the theory of knowledge. Epistemology is about understanding how we come to know that something is the case. So that's the definition or understanding of epistemology that is very relevant as a Christian and everyone's worldview. It connotates, or it is crucial in everyone's worldview. So basically, there's something called metaphysics. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that studies the fundamental nature of reality, the first principles of being, identity and change, space and time, cause and effect, necessity and possibility. Metaphysics is considered one of the four main branches of philosophy, along with epistemology, logic, and ethics. It includes questions about the nature of consciousness and the relationship between mind and matter, between substance, let's see here, I lost my place. Yeah, between substance and attribute, and between potentiality and actuality. Metaphysics studies questions related to what it is for something to exist and what types of existence are there. So there's a part of metaphysics. So this is something we need to note, that ontology is not its own field. It's part of metaphysics itself. So there's a sub-branch of metaphysics we call ontology. And ontology is the philosophical study of being, as well as related concepts such as existence, becoming, and reality. So ontology and metaphysics, they go hand in hand, but it gets more specific though.
Ontology. So are ontology and metaphysics the same thing? Is it just a different word for the same thing?
It's just a branch of metaphysics, yeah, like a sub-branch or subdivision of it, yeah.
Okay.
Ontology is part of the school of thought of philosophy and comes more closely a branch of metaphysics, which investigates. So this is basically or ontology in a nutshell. It investigates the nature of things, including their cause and identity. So now this is where we're going to steer it away from secular epistemology. So Van Tillian epistemology. So here's Van Til's definition of knowledge as, so let me put this down here now. So now we're under Van Tillian epistemology, or we call Presup. Presup is wonderful. I think it's the only way to defend God and represent him correctly, I think, and it destroys atheism. But Van Til's definition of knowledge is justified true belief. Let's get into what does that mean, justified true belief. So whenever a person S knows some fact P, don't forget about the formula gets confusing. It gets explained here. It'll get less confusing here. So just keep rolling along. Several conditions must be obtained. A proposition that S doesn't even believe cannot be or express a fact that S knows. So here's the point of this. So therefore, knowledge requires belief. You can't have knowledge without a belief. So basically, the epistemology we hold to is it's called JTP or JTB, justified true beliefs. False propositions cannot be or express facts, and so cannot be known. Therefore, knowledge requires truth. Finally, S is being correct in believing that P might be merely a matter of luck. So we're going to go into distinctions of what is justified true belief. I think what I have in here in this presentation tonight is examples, so people can, if they don't understand the technicalities of it, that's fine, because we have examples, illustrations, analogies, illustrations to help people out. So here's an example. What's a justified true belief? For example, if Peter believes he has a fatal illness, not because he was told so by his doctor, but solely because he's a hypochondriac, he can't help believing it. And it turns out that, in fact, he has a fatal illness. So here's the point. Peter's being right about this is merely accidental, a matter of luck, bad luck in this case. Therefore, knowledge requires a third element, one that excludes the aforementioned luck, and so that involves S's belief being, in some sense, justifiably or appropriately held. If we take these three conditions on knowledge to be not merely necessary but also sufficient, then S knows that P, and only if P is true, and S, let's see here, and S knows that P, and only if P is true. And that's my position here. So just start all over here. So therefore, knowledge requires a third element, one that excludes the aforementioned luck. So luck cannot be part of justified true belief. And so that involves S's belief.
So luck doesn't really exist, right?
I would say no. I don't think there is such a thing as luck. If there is such a thing, God would have to create it in a world where there is such a thing. It can't be a deterministic. There is no such thing as luck in a deterministic reality.
Right.
That's a whole nother thing to go down to. But if we take these three conditions on knowledge to be not merely necessary, but also sufficient, then S knows that P, and only if P is true, and S justifiably believes that P. So according to this account, the three conditions are truth, belief, and justification.
Okay.
Those are the three elements of justified true belief. You need truth, you need belief, and justification. All are individually necessary and jointly sufficient for knowledge of facts or justified true beliefs. Now, that is the major underlying principle of Van Tillian apologetics, but we're going to get more in depth on Van Tillian epistemology here. So Christian theism's fundamental contention is just this: that nothing whatsoever can be known unless God can be and is known. And by God, we mean the triune self-sufficient God and his revelation of himself to man and the world, and his world that he created. So this is what Van Tillian even said in his own definition of epistemology. The term epistemology comes from the Greek words episteme and logos, or logos in the Greek. So episteme can be translated as knowledge or understanding or acquaintance, while logos can be translated as account or argument or reason. So Van Tillian epistemology of revelation is completely different from any secular or Thomist epistemological theory. So this is a battle of epistemology. This is why I veered away from doing the typical, philosophical understanding of, how to lay out normal epistemology through a secular lens. We don't see epistemology through the same lens as an atheist or someone that's secular or someone else out there. We see it through God. He is our starting spot. He is our starting place. It is not man. It is not our senses. Our senses are important. He's given those to us so we learn innate truths, but we'll keep on going. So within any other epistemological theory, no distinction is made regarding, number one, the knowledge of God. So these other theories out there of epistemology, they don't include the knowledge of God as a regenerate epistemic agent. Number two, the knowledge of God is an unregenerate epistemic agent. And three and
what does that even mean, Praise? Unregenerate epistemic agent?
Mm-hmm. So it's the idea that man is fallen and they suppress the truth in their unrighteousness.
Right.
And we have to account for that. So our starting epistemology is, guess what? The Word of God. Oh, surprise, surprise. But we're going to get justifications for that. Remember, that's part of justified true belief. That is our system of epistemology that verifies God. But we'll get into that. We'll keep on going. So no other epistemology talks about the fallen nature of man and how they suppress the knowledge and truth of God. So, but Van Tillian apologetics does. And I think it's the number. It's easily the best, I think, understanding of truth and epistemology, ontology. So the knowledge of God is unregenerate epistemic agent. 3 and 4. The knowledge of things or propositions as a regenerate or unregenerate epistemic agent. So other epistemological theories do not account for the spiritual state of the epistemic agent. So we have a soul, a spirit, we have a will, that God's given us a moral compass to know what is right and wrong, and his moral law is written in everyone's heart. No other epistemology talks about that. They might indirectly run into it somehow or discover it, but they don't directly add it part of the system itself. So they don't account for the spiritual state of the epistemic, specifically the notion of total depravity, which we understand is not total inability. It's just the idea that man can be depraved.
Right.
Yeah. They can respond to the gospel, though. The special revelation of God, we would call it. So there's 2 revelations in Van Tillian apologetics. One is special revelation, and the other is general revelation.
Okay. So would general revelation be like creation, for example?
Yes. When we look at the beauty of the stars at night, that is undeniable of God's general revelation.
Right.
Yeah. So, and therefore would flatten out all these different types of knowledge into one type. This comes into major play when attempting to map contemporary epistemological theories onto these types of knowledge. So, Van Til mentions, he says this: we need to be self-conscious about our Christ-centered epistemology. starting with God's revelation, is a far stronger foundation than a Christian's own reasoning. And it's the strongest defense of the faith and strongest weapon against unbelieving thought, atheists, non-believers. The trained apologist can show that every interpretation of life other than the Christian one is impossible. So there's only one truth. I am the way, the truth. There is no other truth. There is no other way. There's only one way. There's only one truth. There's only one source of truth. It is the triune God that we serve. Epistemology involves knowing facts, knowing how to do things, knowing people personally, etc. These aspects are interrelated. Example, you can't know how to fix something unless you know things about it. So belief is a positive attitude towards a proposition which guides our actions. That's the definition of faith. You have a belief in a proposition, a positive attitude or trust in a proposition, which is God or the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and his deity. So that is a positive belief. That is definitionally what the word means, belief.
So would the special revelation fall under the belief category?
Yes.
Okay.
So truth is grounded in the mind of God. All truth is derived from the mind of God. It's important. It's not some abstract entity floating around like some platonic, some type of platonic object or something like Platonism. There's no platonic objects out there floating around with truth in it. It's rooted in the mind of God. A Christian's epistemology is revelational, and Christian philosophy is restating God's revealed truth. The idea we can know certain facts apart from God is the opposite. Is the opposite of the Christian view. No unbelieving epistemology can be coherent or consistent. Every standard except God himself is insufficient for grounding knowledge. Both deduction and induction depend on God. So I have that settled for later, deduction, induction, but that's sort of like the peripheral. I'm going to stick on the main parts. So let's start with a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge. So a priori, so
Praise, is this going to fall under the truth category? This next part?
Yes, or knowledge. Yeah.
No. So that'll go now. Well. Yeah, well, I'm just trying to make
truth. Just put truth. Yeah, so yeah, knowledge is truth.
Okay. So I'm just trying to put things in the categories in my notes so I can just find it easily.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no problem, man. They just jump in anytime. Just chime in if you have any questions, because this is really for you and anyone out there. So there's two types of knowledge: a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge. I spelled it wrong though. It's A-P-O-S-T. But don't worry about the spelling. It's just so we'll get.
Can you explain what that means, Praise? I'm sorry.
Yes, we're going to go through this in depth. So hopefully, by the end of this, you'll should go, okay, I understand it now, or at least somewhat of it. So, a priori knowledge is knowledge that is separate from our experience, memories, body sensation, or separate from what we have learned from others. So the term a priori is a Latin phrase. In Latin, a priori means from the former or from the one before. So philosophers generally think that in order for someone to have knowledge about something rather than just a belief that happens to be true, they need justification for it. That is, they need a good reason to think that it is true. In order for some statement to be an instance of an a priori knowledge, a person must believe it is based on an a priori justification, which is justification that depends only on thought and not experience. So a priori, anything that's a priori cannot be based on anything that you do experience or that someone else tells you or anything from someone else. It is basically external to you, outside of yourself. And it's before. So it was there beforehand. Well, yes, what kind of knowledge is out there even before I even discovered it? Well, we'll get into that. In other words,
a priori knowledge, would that be like bacteria and cells, like things we didn't understand until we had like microscopes and things?
No, because we discovered those through experience. So these cannot, even if we didn't discover it through experience, it's still experience, though. So these things cannot be discovered by experience.
I see.
In other words, we're going to get into this, though. Here's some well-known a priori facts. So in other words, the Aristotelian laws of logic, known as the laws of thought, they are a priori. And math itself is also a priori. 2 + 2 was always 4. It never had, we didn't need to experience it being 4 for it to be true. But they go hand in hand. Math and logic go hand in hand. They themselves are justifications for knowledge.
Praise.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna leave Charlie's comment on the screen. Yeah,
I didn't put that up. Who puts that up there?
He showed up to Graham's channel the other day, and he's a conditionalist. I was willing to talk to him about it, but he was very abusive in my comment section. He was using the Lord's name in vain and stuff. So I removed his comment, and he got butthurt about it, and I told him it's not appropriate. And I told him that if he wants to refute my arguments or put something in the chat, respectfully, disagreeing and tell why, that's fine. But he refused to listen, so I blocked him, and now he's complaining I'm trying to censor the truth.
Just really fast. I think I heard Sparrow say that she did not.
No, I did not put that up,
and I didn't either. And if he didn't.
I might have accidentally did it. I don't know. I don't think I did because I was doing on my own thing on the presentation. That's weird.
Well, it's not Kevin, so I wonder how that comment got added up there.
I have no idea.
No worries. I mean, if it was on, I just felt like I had to respond to it if it was going to sit there.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, man. So there's 2 main fundamental a priori sources of knowledge, logic and math, but they go hand in hand. You can't, I don't think they're divorceable,
So in other words, it's knowledge that can't be discovered by anything we could learn or see or touch or experience in this existence, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, okay. It's external to us. It's outside of us. It's there already before we even discovered it. So before we've, I hate the word discover, but I guess you can see I discovered it. We didn't invent it though. We didn't invent the law of non-contradiction. We didn't invent the law of excluded middle and the law of identity. Those are the 3 laws of logic. They are there. They're eternal. They're spaceless. They're timeless. They're immaterial. They're not dependent on time. Time doesn't change their truth, their truthity. They're not located in space anywhere. You can't find them. You can't investigate them in space somewhere.
Right.
And they don't have a material substance. They're immaterial. Well, we'll get into that here in a second, but this is what we call a priori knowledge. And they themselves are justifications for knowledge. on a fundamental scale, yes. Like, how do you know that something is true? Well, you would have to presuppose the laws of logic. They're necessary. That's another thing about the laws of logic. They are necessarily true in every possible world. So, I don't want to get too out track of that because then it gets into, I don't want to, but so the problem is what best accounts for logic and math. How do we explain what worldview best explains logic and math? Well, take a guess. Like how? Okay, let's just go through it. Like the metaphysics of laws of logic, they're timeless, they're spaceless, they're immaterial, they're immutable truths. They're eternally true. I wonder what would best explain that. That's right, God. I mean, it doesn't necessarily get you to a triune God. It'll get you to an immaterial deist God, maybe, but it does get you to a God. So the details have to be ironed out, I guess. You can't just say the laws of logic prove the triune God. I mean, that's the problem. But it gets you out of atheism and naturalism, though. So the laws of logic themselves prove a God exists, or at least an eternal God. Now, I mean, I hate saying that because I grind my teeth, but we have to be, we have to be honest, because then the other other people out there will call us out and say, "Oh, that doesn't prove a triune God." Like, well, there's other ways to do that, though, but this is not one of them. So,
well, that's when we can get into things like love, for existence. Right. For example, like love can't exist without a triune God, because how would God be experiencing love if he was not loving within himself?
That's correct. I think this would go along the line what you just said there would be the one and the many problem. That there's plurality in reality. Right. And there's unity. How do we have unity and plurality? That means there has to be a one and three, or a plural being that is also one, but also that would account for love, because you can't have love without the Trinity, because it's eternally true.
Right.
So I'm going to put that in there, like the problem of the one and many, if you want, as like a side note to look into. So note that if a person believes something is true, a true fact, without any experience to justify it, but they don't have an a priori justification, then it would not be a priori knowledge, because knowledge requires justification. I want to repeat that. Knowledge requires justification. If I have a pink dragon, if I say I have a pink dragon in my garage, you can say that's a priori knowledge, but there's no justification, then therefore it's not knowledge. You need to prove that somehow. Let's continue on, though. For instance, if someone makes a guess based on no evidence and they happen to guess right, it would not be an instance of an a priori knowledge, because they do not truly have knowledge of what they have guessed. So knowledge requires that a person has a good reason for their belief. And an a priori knowledge requires that their reason does not come from experience. So a priori cannot come from the agent itself. It has to be outside of them. Already, I'm saying that already proves God. I would challenge any atheist to demonstrate, have them ground, or have them have a basis or a standard for a priori knowledge. So what basis would you say that? This is how we push atheists, because a priori knowledge itself really eliminates any type of godless reality. But continuing on, here are some examples of a priori knowledge based on definitions. Hexagons have 6 sides. It cannot be the case that hexagons do not have 6 sides. So it's grounded not only in geometry, math, but it's also grounded in logic. A car is a vehicle. See, the essence of carness, it cannot be not a vehicle. So you don't need to witness, you don't need to observe that a car is a vehicle. It is true a priori. Every circle is round. That's another a priori truth.
Well, actually, that one might be incorrect, actually, because you can draw a circle on a piece of paper and it's not round, it's flat. Round is something that has it's three-dimensional.
Well, I think, with the word round, I think what they're getting at is
or you could put every ball is round.
Yeah.
Or
there you go. You can elucidate in that. Yeah. I think this is just a generality. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, am I being picky? I don't know. I'm just trying to be specific.
No, that's fine. No, be picky is cool. There are also other types of a priori knowledge that are not based on definitions. And this is what I was getting at in math, that it's eternally true. 3 + 3 is 6. You cannot have any other instance where 3 + 3 is not 6. Or 8 × 1 is 8. Or 7 is a prime number. If some number A is divisible by 5 and some number B is divisible by 5, then A times B will be divisible by 5. That's just the rules that come with. They're rules that are there already in place before we discover them. They're eternally true. Even the rules themselves are eternal. Now, that is what we call a priori knowledge. Now we're going to get into a posteriori knowledge. So a posteriori, this is a hard one for me, it really is. A posteriori knowledge is based on experience. Translated from the Latin, a posteriori means from what is after. You can remember the term by thinking about how post, P-O-S-T, means after. So a posteriori refers to what knowledge comes after you experience something, like seeing a bunch of broccoli and learning it is green. That is a posteriori knowledge. So it's not a, it's a. You say a posteriori, yeah. So the battle between a priori and a posteriori knowledge is known as the battle between empiricism. And here's what empiricism is. This is atheism. This is what secular is. This is today we're battling in our world. This is the idea that all learning comes from only sensory data through observation and testing. That's empiricism. So a priori and a posteriori knowledge is basically summed up as empiricism and rationalism. So a posteriori knowledge is empiricism. Am I losing you there, Kevin? Because if I'm not making sense, and I can try to clarify this too.
Well, no, I'm trying to type here while you're talking. I'm trying to follow along. You're going a little fast, but it's all right.
Well, what I'll do is I'll send you this after anyway, and you can just read through
great.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just going like a brief rundown, and then we'll open it up to chat. If any atheist wants to come and challenge this, they're more that come on in. Guys can come on in. We'll be more than happy to bring you in here. So
is this going to get into the justification aspect, Praise?
Sort of, yes, but it's going to show you the differences and how each one is contrasted against each other.
All right.
So basically, a priori knowledge is what they put in the camp of rationalism. Now, I don't disagree. I disagree with that, because I would put it into the Van Tillian apologetics. So that's what we would do. So if a general theist might put it into what they call Christian rationalism or something, and I think it fails. I think it falls apart when you get away from God as the starting point. But So the battle between a priori and a posteriori knowledge is known as the battle between empiricism. This is the idea that all learning comes from only sensory data through observation and testing, and rationalism. Rationalism characterizes at least some what we know as innate. So there's innate knowledge. Let's say we have morals, and they're innate inside of every human being. So there's certain things that are innate. In other words, knowledge is not merely sensory, but intellectual and deductive. You can deduce things rather than try to formulate, like, basically do things through empiricism, or through trial and error, or some type of testing, some type of research. Like, there are things outside of that. So through deep pondering, we can discover knowledge introspectively. That's irrespective of sensory data. So we have like introspection and things like that. So rationalists don't even deny knowledge can come through experience, but they just deny all knowledge comes from the senses. Today we have radical empiricists all over the place. They think unless it can't be tested, unless it can't meet the scientific method, therefore it's not true. All knowledge must come from the scientific method. And ultimately, we'll go through why that is self-refuting. And one of them is that it presupposes its own failure, because you would need to presuppose the scientific method to prove the scientific method, or empiricism to prove empiricism. So, you know what? I think we're probably going to go down that route here in the. I have a whole post on this, so I'm going to pull that up here in a second. We'll just keep going right now, though. So a big name for you to remember is Alvin Plantinga. He's put out numerous works. He's a world-renowned philosopher in Christianity. And he's argued, he's prolific in showing that Christian beliefs are properly basic. So, properly basic beliefs are beliefs that we can justify within ourselves without external justification. Let me give some examples here. So consider, for instance, certain kinds of perceptual beliefs, memory beliefs, and beliefs about other persons. Beliefs such as 1, I see a tree, I had breakfast this morning, and 3, that the person is angry. Such beliefs are not based on evidence. How could you show evidence of a memory? Or that you see a tree, you might see something completely different than someone else sees. And this kind of goes into NDEs too. So, near-death experiences, like, they would fit under properly basic beliefs. Yet they are not simply groundless. Rather, they are grounded in particular experiences. In most circumstances, I am surely justified in taking these beliefs as basic. So, they're even they're even another category, I would say, than a priori. Like, these are just beliefs that are justified in yourself, but they're not justified outside of yourself. So we can be Christians. Let's say, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because there are people out there that have experiences or of Jesus Christ, and like, this is Muslims even. Like, you can look this up on YouTube and see people are having visions of Jesus coming to them, and they become strong Christians. So that would come under properly basic beliefs, but they can't justify it through the scientific method or something. How could you prove such a thing? And it's a category error to begin with. The scientific method only discovers things that are empirically investigatable in the first place. They don't like, basically the scientific method does not search for a priori truths, things that are like basically the fundamental aspects of reality. So like you see, like the problem with atheists is that they're reversed. It's like flipped upside down. They're looking things through the lens of things that are not even fundamental. They're just looking at particular things that are parts of reality rather than the universal aspects of reality, like logic. Logic is universally true, and so is math. Those things are the basis or the grounds for everything else.
Yeah, but Praise, are you saying that math is eternal? Or
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I would say they go hand in hand with logic. So I'm going to give you an example. 2 plus 2 would always equal 4. There is not a case where 2 plus 2 would not equal 4. That is math and logic working together. But I wanted to show you, I think this is a very... I'll send you the link to this too, because I'm not expecting everyone to soak this in and like, oh yeah, I'm going to get this tonight. I'm going to, for the next day tomorrow, I'm going to go destroy people or something. Like, I understand. It took me a long time to even like get this understanding.
So did you go to college for this, Praise?
No, I actually didn't. I went through hours and hours and hours of papers in philosophy. I've also interviewed philosophers, and they held me along. So it's through their guidance too of other philosophers helping me out. So you need help to understand philosophy. I don't think anyone could do it on their own power or their own thinking power. You need help. You need some type of assistance in understanding really what's going on and how to parse things out. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're just exchanging philosophical understandings of how things operate, in reality. And this is what it's all about. And coming and attacking it from a Christian worldview. Because the others will not. They'll come from out of the secular point of view, but you see how it undermines itself if you take God out of the equation. That's why Van Tillian apologetics is so paramount and so integral in how we approach epistemology, ontology, metaphysics. Meta-ethics is another one. We can do that for another time. Meta-ethics just talks about, basically morality and ethics. But it gets much, I'm just saying, man, like philosophy is a never-ending endeavor. It's awesome, though. I mean, philosophy, it can take you over really quick. So let me pull this up really quick. So one of the things that we're battling with non-believers out there is empiricism. I think we went through that everything has to be validated through your sensory data and through research and through testing. That's the only knowledge you can obtain. And this is how empiricists think. And what they do is they cut, their knees off, that old saying. Let's just think something really quick here. Yeah, they cut their knees out from under them when they do that. They basically, destroy even any other fundamental aspects of reality when they do that. But here we go. So it turns out the methodology which atheists evaluate God exists or not is self-refuting. Yes, atheists, there's more to reality than what the senses dictate. In fact, These reasons show why God exists because there is a higher order to reality. And we're going to go through this. Refutations of empiricism. So on the theory of empiricism, at birth, the mind is blank. This is what they say. And 2, sensations are basic. And 1, and then 1, then 3, and then infers perceptions from sensations. These perceptions are then stored in the mind, and then 4, memory images from which are abstracted, and then 5, ideas or concepts. So we'll go through these. So the senses are not trustworthy. The first step in an empirical theory of knowledge is the acquisition of raw data through the senses. For senses often deceive. The Mandela effect, doppelgangers, all these things topple over the senses are not trustworthy. The senses are very untrustworthy. So that itself would actually overturn or partially overturn empiricism. Clark says, if a witness in a criminal case is shown to have perjured himself, how much credence do you have to give the other statements he made? If your eyes deceived you once, you can't believe any of it. So if human senses have been shown to be fallible, then you can't put your stock, you can't put your justification in empiricism. So here's another point. Empiricism cannot produce universal propositions. This is what we were saying. A priori truths are universal, but empiricism can't give a justification for a priori truths that are universal. But the method that empiricists employ to generate universal proposition is to make generalizations based on a limited number of individual sensory experiences. This is called the method of induction. We're going to get into that here in a few moments, the problem of induction. Universal propositions are like those that attribute a common characteristic to all items of a kind, such as all men are mortal. Induction, however, commits the logical fallacy as knowing as affirming the consequent. So it's even it's fallacious even on its own merit. So empiricism is self-refuting because it's affirming the consequent. It cannot affirm universals or cannot ground universals. Also, empiricism cannot determine individuals. So you have individuals in reality we call particulars. So here's an example of the problem. So there's a massive mountain called Mount Blanca. It stands at the southern end of the Sangre de Cristo range. Is it then really a thing, an individual, a primary reality, or is it a primary reality? If the entire range is a primary reality, then Mount Blanca is not a real thing. So how do you even distinguish between individual particulars and then universals? You can't do it. It's self-refuting. And here's the biggest reason why empiricism is self-refuting is lastly, the claim that knowledge comes only from sensory experience cannot itself come from sensory experience. On its own merits, empiricism should be rejected. So this is you can see now how weak, feeble, flawed, self-refuting what atheists have to do to reject God. This is what they resort to as empiricism. But so let's get back to the other part here. So consider for existence certain kinds of perceptual beliefs, memory beliefs, and beliefs about other persons, beliefs such as, I see a tree. I think we went through that. You don't need external justification. Those are properly basic beliefs. And those are just your personal beliefs about God, how the Holy Spirit is
So, Praise, I have a question. So
Sure.
what would you do with the lunatic that looks at the tree and says, well, we can't know for certain that this tree actually exists?
Yes,
There are people like that.
Yes, there are. It's called the brain in the vat. It's the idea that there can be nothing, there can be no knowledge, that minds, like your mind, it's called like, it's like a solipsistic type of argumentation, that your mind is the only thing that exists. You can't prove minds exist outside of your mind. But that is also self-defeating as well. I have a whole video on that. I actually did it with Tom Rabbit because he had a challenge in solipsism. So basically, for solipsism to even work, you would need a ultimate metaphysic to even ground that, like metaphysical realism, which we would say is God anyway. So for that to even work, you would need God to be there making that happen, in other words. So it's self-refuting. I'll give you the video. You can look at it with solipsism. Yeah. It's called the brain in the vat and all this other stuff. But let's continue. That's a good question. Did I help you out there? Or was that still kind of cloudy?
I'll have to just watch the video.
Yeah. I'll help you out with it. It does take a little bit of background knowledge in philosophy, though, to attack. But so Alvin Plantinga goes on to suggest that the theist is perfectly justified in holding belief in God to be properly basic, even though the theist may not be able to offer specific alternative criteria for properly basic belief. And we gave several examples of those. I just want to go back. Like, I see a tree. Maybe you see a different, like, well, what does that mean to you when you see a tree? Do you see the same tree I do? I had breakfast this morning. So how could you prove you had breakfast? How could you justify that you had breakfast? You can say, well, here's some of the stuff I used for breakfast, but what if they weren't around? Like, you can't prove that, but you know it's justified, though. A person is angry. How could you prove what angry means? Like, what does that even mean, angry, in an empirical sense? Can you test angriness? Like, you can't even test something like that. But, yeah. So here's 3 problems that the atheist must contend with. One is the demarcation problem. In philosophy of science and epistemology, the demarcation problem is the question of how to distinguish between science and non-science. It examines the boundaries between science, pseudoscience, and other products of human activity, like art and literature and beliefs. It just becomes a quarrel of arbitrarity. It's just arbitrarity that what science amounts to without an ultimate source of epistemology or truth as God. So I think what these problems show is you need God as the starting point of all epistemology and truth. And this is what you can argue. You can tell an atheist, like, how do you know things are true? What do you base truth on? What is your theory of truth? They might say what the correspondence theory. Well, the correspondence theory that anything that corresponds in reality is truth. Well, then you can say, you can bring this up. Well, no, sir, there's the demarcation problem. Well, how do you solve the demarcation problem if you hold to the idea that the correspondence theory of truth? You can just pick them apart, Kevin. You see how fun philosophy is? You can outwit, you can
So it seems like the difficult part is just learning the terms of what these things mean.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, there's a lot of terms and weird words that you have to learn.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue.
I think that's the start of it.
That is, you're right though. That is like the big. Once you get out of the way of understanding the terms, it becomes, you're right, a lot easier. That's the big hill to climb to get over for sure. So that's the first one, is the demarcation problem. And here's another one they have to contend with, the problem of induction. So we were talking about induction earlier, deduction, but the problem is catastrophic for atheists who are empiricists, because as David Hume pointed out, someone who relies on immediate sensory data has to assume the rationally unfounded premise that the future will resemble the past. So the empiricists can only rely on the past and the present. How do they know the truth is going to be the same? So one moment to the next. In other words, if something is true one moment, what would substantiate it being true the next moment? And the next moment, the next moment, the next moment. And if it can't be substantiated the next moment, the next moment, the next moment, then is it really truth? And we would say, yes, it's eternally true, like the laws of logic, and you can't have, everything really hinges on the laws of logic and math. So what would be the basis of uniformity? This is a huge problem for atheists. They can't account for uniformity. They just can't. So there are two main variants of the problem. The first appeals to the uniformity observed in nature. How do they explain that without God? While the second relies on the notion of cause and effect, or necessary connection. So how do they even, there's something in philosophy, like the cause and effect, like basically like the law of causality, but I forget the official name of it because my brain is so garbled right now, but basically, yeah, so cause and effect. How do you address cause and effect? Where does that come from? Or yeah, it's called the principle of sufficient reason. That's it. So how do atheists, how do they account for the principle of sufficient reason? Let me put this up here really quick. I'm going to add that to it. How do atheists account and explain the principle of sufficient reason? We call it the PSR. So the PSR, remember that, it's huge. And as a defender of the Christian faith. Hit save. My gosh. Okay. If a person asks why he believes that the sun will rise tomorrow, he might say something like the following: in the past. Well, in the past, it's risen. The earth has turned on its axis every 24 hours, more or less. And there is a uniformity in nature that guarantees that such events will happen in the same way. But how does one know that nature is uniform in this sense? It might be answered that in the past, nature has always exhibited this kind of uniformity. And so it will continue to do so in the future. But this interference is justified only if one assumes the future must resemble the past. How is this assumption itself justified? Oh, one might say that in the past, the future always turned out to resemble the past, and so on. In the future will again turn out to resemble the past. So this, I'm sorry, not interference, this inference, so all they're doing is making inferences, but it's a false inference. So this inference, however, is circular. It's begging the question. You've already assumed that it will be before it even happened. So that's called question begging, or it's circularity. So it succeeds only by tacitly assuming what it sets out to prove, namely that the future will resemble the past. Therefore, the belief that the sun will rise tomorrow is rationally unjustified as an atheist. An atheist cannot say the sun will rise tomorrow. So this is the problem of induction. Let's go to the third one. The third one is the Gettier problem. So a Gettier problem is any example that demonstrates that an individual can satisfy the classical analysis of knowledge, justify true belief without possessing knowledge. Ooh, it gets tricky here. So here's an example. I think this is why like examples are so important, because some people, the technicalities, the terminology, like it just goes over people's heads, but examples kind of make it clear. Suppose you look outside the window one day and see a figure shoveling snow. You recognize the coat and silhouette and think, oh, that's my dad shoveling snow. However, that person isn't actually your father, but your next door neighbor. He owns the same winter jacket as your father and is the similar height. Yet coincidentally, on the other side of the house, your father is in fact shoveling snow. Can you say that you knew that your dad was shoveling snow? So here's the problem in formulation terms. It seems that there's three conditions to have knowledge, and that's truth, justification, and belief of knowledge have been met, but that there is no knowledge. So you can't have knowledge. The Gettier problem shows that you cannot have knowledge without some type of ultimate standard or ultimate framework to operate off of. How do you have knowledge in that case? So here's another problem for empiricists. I don't think they can't get close to solving this. So those are the three big problems for atheists. I think we're going to probably call it there, because let's see, we've been going on for about 1:10. But what do you think of that, Kevin?
Interesting stuff. There are some terms that I don't know, or I'm trying to learn.
We should do more of these. And like even like ethics and morality, we can do that too sometime.
Right. Yeah.
But you can see the weapons that are at your disposal when it comes to when it comes to non-believers. I mean, you have a lot of weapons you can use. Yeah.
Right on.